but I'm not so sure. I mean, if you go and you get experience, then if you really want to live here, you could do
You
that.
can do that.
Yeah, you could do it. It's not going to be easy, but nothing's really easy. But
a guest speaker. Her name is Barbara. Is
Michaelman.
Michaelman.
A guest speaker.
And she's
put Nisley because no one can pronounce either Nisley or Michaelman where I'm from. So.
Around here, you wouldn't have to worry about
right?
She's here to talk to you about what life might look like a little bit after you graduate from high school. She's was a communications major in college, but she'll talk a little bit more about her background and what she does, and then we're hoping that you may have lots of questions for her.
Thanks for having me, you guys. You can call me Barbara. Just don't call me Barb because I don't like my name shortened. That's all. That's my big joke. Everybody calls me Barbara. I don't like it. But Mr. Allison and your principal, when we were talking, when they reached out to me, I went to school here. I think you know that. I graduated in 1984, so I'm old, but still working in communications. And what I think about when Mr. Allison asked me to come in, I didn't have anybody like me when I was your age to talk about opportunities. I had parents who came out of the recession of the 70s and the 80s. My dad lost his job. He was unemployed for a whole year until he found another job. He had a high school diploma, and so he said to me, when I came out of the Korean War, I could have taken advantage of the GI Bill and gone to college. And I didn't because jobs were really plentiful then. And that worked for him until he was in his maybe 50s. And then a lot of the jobs went away. So what he said to my siblings and me, you're going to college. Like, that's not an option. You're going to college. Oh, and by the way, you have to pay for it too. So there was no money in my family. I had to pay for it myself. I had to figure it out on my own. And I'm sure all of you at some point are used to figuring things out on your own. It's just a part of life, right? So I know that you're in different career technical areas that you're going into, and I would love to know more about that. What I'd like to just share with you a little bit is why I went into communications and why everybody needs good communication skills. Doesn't matter what you do for a living. So I put this up here on the first slide, communications, is that a real job? Because my parents said, we don't care what you study, we just want you to go to college. And I said, I don't think I'm ready for college. Can I take a year and just work? Because I have to pay for it, so can I put some money in the bank? And they said, no, if you don't go right away, you'll never go. So then I was like, I'm 18, I don't really, I like to write, I like to debate, I love to read, and I watch the news all the time. So maybe I'll be a journalist. And my parents said, yeah, that's not a real job. And then, if you don't know me, but I think Mr. Allison, when someone tells me I can't do something, then I want to do it even more. So then I was like, you'll see, it's a real job. So I went to school to get a communications degree, and I'll just give you some background stats on me. So I graduated in 1984, the best class. There's like no debate. That was the best class ever in Plattsburgh, right? And I was born and raised here. I was, on Shellsburg Road in Queen. My parents built a house on my grandparents' farm, and I was born and raised there. And in a house with 6 people that I had 1 bathroom. And my yearbook prediction was that I'd pursue a career in communications. So I received my bachelor's degree in professional writing with an emphasis in journalism, which is a big ridiculous title that they had back then, at California University of Pennsylvania, which now is Penn West, California. And I'm really bitter about that because it sounds like an insurance agency. So I refuse to call my alma mater anything other than California University of Pennsylvania. And then I had one of my professors who said, you really need a master's degree. And he really wanted me to leave the state of Pennsylvania and go somewhere else for graduate school to get my master's degree. But I stayed in Pennsylvania, and I went to Philadelphia to go to Temple to get that degree. And I did move back here. I lived back here for about 3 or 4 years, and I had the opportunity to get a job in Washington, D.C., and so that's where I've been ever since, living in that area of the Washington, D.C. area. So I'm gonna not talk at you the whole time. I'm just gonna give you a couple things if you wonder what a communications degree is. You know, a lot of people think it's marketing, it's advertising. It is, that can be part of it, but there's so many things that you can do with communication skills. My first job was a legislative representative. I was a lobbyist. I was terrible at it. I was very much bad. I would go into a senator or representative's office and I would talk with a legislative assistant and say, this is what my organization believes and we want you to do this. And they would say, yeah, we're not doing that. And I would be like, okay, thanks. And then I would leave. But what that job did is it forced me to talk to people. Forced me to talk to strangers, right? People I didn't know, and I had to convince them or try and convince them. I was a publication editor, so I started out in agriculture. When I went to DC, I worked for the National Grange as a legislative representative and then their communications director, because that was the nation's oldest general agricultural and rural family service organization in the United States. So I worked for the smallest, and then I went to Farm Bureau, and I was the editor of their newspaper. So legislative rep, publication editor, content creator. You go on a website. There's lots of words there. That's content. People like me write that for people. Brand, image management. You all know influencers. They all work with people to help them say what they say and how they speak in public. That's brand management. Pitching reporters or being a spokesperson. I have always worked for advocacy organizations, so I've always worked for people who wanted legislative changes, regulatory changes in Washington, D.C. I'd have to talk to reporters. And I would have to, they'd be on deadline, I'd be the person that they would call, and I would have to talk to them. Speechwriter. My job is basically putting words in the mouths of other people. So, the Wizard of Oz, behind the curtain, that's me. Like, I'm never the person out front, I put other people out front and try and make them look good. Media trainer, there is a skill to talking to the media and responding to questions and being knowledgeable about something. And so as a communications person, if you have a president of an organization who is the person who speaks on behalf of the company, I can train people like that. I train them how to sit so that if they're on camera, they're not doing this or they're not, playing with their hands and how to answer something very quickly to get your point across. And conference presenter, giving presentations like this in front of crowds at conferences on different topics. So I don't think, when I was your age and I went into college, I didn't know that all of these things were going to be available to me to use my degree. They just came through different opportunities. So effective communications. I think I sat down and thought, what makes for an effective communications? Someone who's really good at it. It doesn't matter if you do a job like mine, you're just good at communications. I think you have to have a really strong sense of curiosity. You're constantly asking why. Why? Somebody said that. Why did they say that? I don't understand that. Let me research it. Reading. I read something every day. I love to read. I've always loved to read. Willingness to ask questions, asking why. I don't understand, tell me more about that. Interest in research. I love statistics. I don't like statistic classes, but I love numbers. I love to understand what percentage of you are going into a different job or a different career pursuit? Taking something really complex and being able to distill it down to where an average person who is not an expert in that area understands it. That's the ability to simplify something. So through your skills, if I'm trying to explain a piece of legislation, for example, I could do that in a way that the average person would understand why it was important. Why is it important for your public school, for example, to get federal, state, and local funding? You know, and anytime that formula changes, how would that affect you as a student? I do a lot of work in public education. Do you like to argue? If so, you'll be really good at communicating because I love to argue, debate. I was in the debate team here at school and enjoy writing and editing, especially your own work. And okay, that's me done talking at you. I know a lot of you are in different career technical areas, and so what I wanted to just open it up is for questions, but also to say, I can't emphasize enough in the quote unquote real world, your ability to look someone in the eye, your ability to be able to communicate information about your area of skill, your expertise, explaining that to a potential customer, explaining that to if you're going to be a manager in the workforce and being able to communicate, your ability to give information in a way that that person understands it and properly applies it, that's communications. And so this is where, like, I say, there are no dumb questions. They're not. Don't be afraid to ask something. I don't know what you're thinking. You may not know what to ask, but I really am done talking at you and we'd love to just get some questions from you. Yes?
Can you explain what communication is?
Of course.
You're in school for it, what were they teaching?
Yeah, so very good question. Writing, a lot of writing. So I would learn how to write a news article. So a straight news article, like if you look in the newspaper, you look online, I still read print newspapers, you guys probably read things online, but Associated Press is a news service that goes all over the United States. And their job is just to report factual information. United Press International, they do a lot of coverage internationally. So if you read the front of the Altoona Mirror, the Bedford Gazette, and you see like a little designation AP, that is a news service and that is someone who's covering the news. So you learn how to write a straight news article. You learn how to write a press release. So in my job, writing was a lot of my job. Writing and speaking are, I would say, the two areas that I use the most. And so I learned how to write. I read a lot. And then we would have professors who would say, I want you to analyze this piece of writing. And so when I was coming into journalism in the 80s, there was something called new journalism. And it was a whole new way of writing articles. And I loved it because it was basically taking a big issue, but putting a person at the center of the story. So let's say you lived in an apartment complex that there was a fire. And instead of just going out and reporting, there was a fire, this happened, this happened, I would interview somebody like you and say, how long did your family live here? How did this impact you? So you put people at the center. So I think that's probably for me in my career, I love the human interest piece. And that could be called a feature story. You also learn how to write editorials, commentaries. So that is taking a position that you feel something is good or something is bad, or you think something needs to be changed or amended. Is that helpful? Yeah, and then I think too, like journalism can be broadcast as well. If you have a great voice, podcasting. I mean, I'm a podcast nerd. I love to listen to podcasts, and I'm real picky. If I hear somebody's voice and into my ear, I don't like the sound of their voice. It's just a personal thing, right? But a lot of people do really well on podcasts because of the sound of their voice. So your ability to engage somebody, either by what you are writing or what you are saying, is really, I think, at the heart of communications. Yeah. Somebody else have a question? Thought maybe I saw another hand. Oh, please, come on, don't make me sit up here and like just look at all we do.
Or how about explaining that communications, whether they go to college or not, is so critical with whatever jobs they get?
Yeah, I mean, I really think like your ability to be successful in any professional job. Like, I'm gonna go from the people who come to my house to fix the HVAC system, who are plumbers. When they come into my house, and they explain what they're doing in a way that I understand, because I don't have that skill set. I don't know how an HVAC system works, but the really good people that I want to keep coming back are the people that I trust, because they're able to explain what they do in a way that makes me feel comfortable, that they know what they're doing, right? So that's one way that I think communications is really critical. You know, I grew up in an area where you were forced to look adults in the eye. That was something my parents made me do. You know, look at Mr. So-and-so, don't just stand there. You know, my parents were like that. My parents were high school educated. They were born and raised in Bedford County. We were like right on the other side, but you know, went to school here in Claysburg. Although my mom went to Bedford because she was raised in Newark. So she always said Bedford was a better school system than Claysburg, so that was a big joke in our house growing up. She was very proud that she went to Bedford. But yeah, like, I mean, that was just for my parents. I would watch my dad. My dad was a butcher at a grocery store. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she volunteered a lot at our church. So my mom was on the church council, and she was the chair, or she was the secretary, and so she was always having to speak in front of people. My dad was the guy who, you know, you pushed the button and you had a problem with something. My dad worked at Acme. That's not a grocery chain that's around here anymore, but you know, that was really the impetus for me. It was my dad came home from work one day and said, all the Acmes west of Harrisburg are closing, and so I don't have a job. And he was the manager of the meat department in Bedford at that grocery store. And I think about this a lot because I don't know if you know this, like my dad had the opportunity to move us to the Philadelphia suburbs. They would have given him a job there. So if he would have moved us to the Philadelphia suburbs, he would have continued to work for Acme. And he and my mom thought about that, and they said this was where their whole extended family was. And so I think how different my life would have been if I had moved there. And I think the thing that I want to say to all of you is I'm really proud of where I came from, you know, and I hope that is something that you're proud of too, because it was hard here. You know, it was hard for me to find opportunities. It was hard to, it was just hard. But any opportunity that came my way, I never said no to it. I think that's another thing in communications is you get over your discomfort and you just keep moving forward with it. Like, it's not, nobody is born being a good communicator. Nobody gets that skill immediately. You learn it, just like you learn anything that you're learning in your career technical programs right now. But I really believe your ability to be successful in your jobs, whatever you decide to do, if you decide to go and take college classes, I I love career technical education because I think the pathway system now is, we didn't have that when I was in school. And I love that. And I always tell kids that I talk to who are in career tech, like, think about taking a class, a business class, you know, like, you might want to run your own company someday, right? You might want to run your own, whatever you're studying, you might want to be the boss someday. You might want to start working for someone and then break out on your own. And communication skills, you're going to have to learn how to market yourself, how to run a business. And that's communications too.
So in college, was it just like learning to journalize, or were you learning how to talk to people and run people in that situation?
Both. That's a good question. So I would say it was, you know, probably more in my master's program, but definitely in undergraduate, like communications would be, you have to present an idea in front of the class. So I know a lot of colleges are doing now with communications programs, a company that doesn't have a lot of money but needs a good communication strategy. Schools will work with local companies and they'll have the students create the communications plan and come up with the talking points and suggest copy or create a website. And so you have to present that in front of, you know, your peers in class, and your ability to explain that idea. I'll use this example. And my nephew is in business school right now, and the majority of what he does, I don't understand. Like he's IT tech guy, and he talks to me, and I just nod my head and say, okay. I have no idea what you're talking about right now, but sounds good. And he had to present, he's in his master's business program right now. He went to Williamsburg, grew up in Williamsburg, you know, he attended a school just like this, and he had to present a business idea in his class. Now, he created a startup. You guys all know what startups are. And so he wants to get into venture capitalism. So he has started a startup in college. He gave the presentation, like I was just saying, here's my idea. And after class, his professor came up to him and said, I want in on that. So, you know, like it may be, sometimes I think like, it's good to have somebody like me talk to you, but also like when you get out in the real world, and if you're frustrated with your inability to, why am I not getting this promotion? Why is it difficult for my coworkers or my boss to understand what I'm trying to communicate? It is a skill set. And so, you know, I think it's like really good to argue with people, like practice that, you know? I mean, I grew up in a family that talked about politics all the time. And my grandmother's house was libertarians and conservatives and Democrats and liberals and conservatives, and they would get into these knockdown, drag-out arguments, and I would just sit there and be like, this is so cool. Because it was just this exchange of ideas, right? And then they would all leave, and they would all say, love ya, and see you next week. And I think that's one of the things that makes me sad right now is I think we've lost a lot of the ability to communicate with each other across our differences. And the lack of communications and in-person communication, it's hard. You know, like I said, I mean, I don't have it up there now, but when I was a legislative representative and someone told me no, you know, but I had to learn learn how to walk up to people and extend my hand and say, hi, I'm Barbara Nisley, and I represent the National Grange, and you are, you know, and I had to make those connections. So it forces you to get out of your comfort zone, and it forces you to just really keep honing it. I mean, I've been at this for 30 years, and there are people who are 10 times better at it than me, and there are people who are 10 times worse. And oftentimes the people who are 10 times worse make a lot more money than I do. But I think what I've been able to do is going to college, having people who expose me to ideas and information that I would have not otherwise had the chance to learn, and then going out into the world and applying those skills. You know, it was not easy. I got to be a big fish in a little pond here, and then I went to college, and then I went to graduate school, and then I went out into the world, and there were lots of big fish in the ocean, right? And so you kind of just have to figure out like how to navigate all of that, and you make a lot of mistakes, but you learn. My very first boss at the National Grange, he said to me, every day at 4:30, I want you to come into my office. And I want you to have a list of questions about things you didn't understand today. And I took that really seriously. And so every day I would go into his office and I would say, I was at this meeting today and they said NRECA. Because people in Washington throw out acronyms all the time. It's just like, you know, SSN and NRECA and ECI and everybody just sits around the table like, I didn't know any of that stuff. So I would sit at these meetings and I would write it down and I would go into his office and I would learn NRECA means National Rural Electric Cooperative Association. And so those are the electric co-ops in areas, you know, here that do that kind of work. If I had gone in and said, oh no, I don't have any questions, like I just learned so much because I wasn't afraid to ask. So I think that's a lot of success in the real world is not being afraid to ask because you think the question sounds wrong. The person on the receiving end of your question, if they think your question is not a good one, that's on them, not on you. Like, right? If somebody pokes at the way you ask a question, that's some insecurity within them, not within you, right? And so you should never let that be something that holds you back from asking and learning. I just think like I'll spend the rest of my life learning about stuff. Like I love that, you know? I love nothing more than to read a book about something I don't know, read an article in the newspaper, listen to a podcast. Like it's, and then what that does is it informs my vocabulary, it informs my my writing, my ability to communicate. It's just, you know, it's funny, like someone will say, how do you know that? So I just read it somewhere, you know, like, yeah, so.
You got time left.
What
Lots
else?
of questions.
Anything else?
I'm curious, how many of you are thinking of going to college? Just thinking. Okay.
And so, you raised your hand, may I ask you, like, what are you thinking about pursuing? Oh my gosh, awesome. So so what interests you about that? Yeah.
I've seen your work.
So I love that because, and your name is Skylar? So Skylar in digital communications, I mean, yeah, you know, that's not an area of expertise for me, but the ability to communicate something effectively in, you know, a digital short, a video. Do you like to do graphic arts too? Yeah, so, and that's not a skill that I have. So I think that's a perfect example of like going into the workforce. I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not. And so I will say a lot of the times, if you need design work, I know somebody who can do that, but that's not my skill set. But like digital communications is you could work with a writer or you could work with an editor who would help you hone what it was that you wanted to say, what you're trying to communicate. And if you guys like to draw or you're interested, you like graphic design, I mean, you know, that area of work is only going to expand. And the more time we spend online, and we're much more visual, so shorter amounts of words have to be more powerful and more effective because a lot is being communicated through design and illustration and video clips. So good for you. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I wish I had the skill for design and the digital piece, but I'm a writer. What else? Who else is thinking about going to college? I know there are other hands. Come on. Did you raise your hand? So what are you thinking about doing?
Teaching.
Yeah. So what are you thinking about teaching?
Music.
Music? Okay. So you're gonna have to stand up in front of class, and the ability to convince those kids to pay attention, be engaged. Those are really good communication skills. So yeah, I would absolutely encourage in when you look at course study, you know, speech communications, anything like being up in front of the classroom, just something as simple as knowing how to project your voice so that people hear you. Theater was really good. I was a theater kid here when I was in school, and so getting up on a stage and pretending was a really good skill set to have to go out into the world. I mean, there's such a need for teachers, and your ability to inspire somebody else to pursue something similar, going into music as a profession. What do you play?
A couple things, like drums and guitar.
Nice.
I'm working on it.
Oh, that's wonderful. You never learned an instrument. I was a silk in the band, and I played the bass drum just so I could get a band jacket.
I saw a hand back there.
Yes, somebody else? Yeah,
Physical therapist.
nice. Physical therapists have saved my back, and I love them so much, so I think that is a very worthwhile endeavor. And I will say communications and physical therapy. I would have physical therapists who would say, I'm going to try dry cupping, and I would say, what's that? Or they would say dry needling or cupping, sorry. And the ability to explain what they were going to do and how that would benefit me, those are excellent skills. Like, you don't want somebody coming up and messing with your back who can't communicate what they're doing, right? And so instilling trust in the patients that you would be helping, like that is very important. Who else?
However, question.
Yeah.
What was the biggest success story, whether it was convincing as a lobbyist or getting a business to come with you or speaking in front of a big crowd?
Biggest success?
Biggest success.
I got my organization on the front cover of Time magazine.
You did?
Yeah.
Wow.
I worked for an organization called the Partnership for 21st Century Skills. And so looking at the skills that students and the workforce would need in the 21st century. So a lot of communication. I'm sorry?
How accurate were you?
How accurate? What do you mean?
Yeah, like how close did you get to what the students work?
Say that again.
Like you said that the skills of the students to
Yeah.
work for it.
So that
Like, how do you explain
organization,
that?
yeah, so that organization was an education business coalition. So it was a lot of tech companies and a lot of education associations in Washington DC coming together and saying, hey, so here's kind of how a coalition works. You know, you get those people here that hire or educate, and you bring those together and you say, these are skills we are not seeing from employees coming in. And then the education experts say, okay, this maybe is how we need to teach English or math or science. And problem solving, critical thinking, communications were three of the big pieces of 21st century skills. And so I feel, so I have a 19-year-old and I feel his education I've seen the benefit of 21st century skills, right? I've seen that he has the ability to think critically and debate. And so I would say, I think that is only as successful as how it's being applied, right? There's lots of great ideas out there in the world, but how they are communicated. I always say this, when somebody launches a product or there's a bill introduced in Congress or something, anything that's introduced and it fails, bad communications. People didn't understand why that issue was important, or they had misinformation. They didn't get a full picture. They only got a piece of it. And so communications in a lot of ways, I mean, gets you to decide who you're gonna buy from. Like where you're gonna shop, what products you buy, who you vote for, what kind of music you listen to. You know, it's effective communications for how that information gets out or doesn't get out. Any other questions?
Did you make your son go to college?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, that's something that he wanted to do, but, yeah, I mean, well.
Like if he didn't want to, would you force him like your parents did?
No. But I would have said, if you're not going to go to school, then you have to find a way to, you know, like, okay, if you're not going to go to school, then you have to get a job. And you have to pay your own bills and, you know, so yeah, I think I would have done that. I don't think anybody should be forced to do something. I will say that I don't regret my parents making me go, but probably that first year I probably wasted a lot of my own time because I wasn't ready. So I don't think there's a problem with going to college and saying, I don't know what I want to do yet, and taking your first year to take different classes and explore. That's what my son is doing right now. I mean, he thought that he wanted to be, he loves linguistics, studying languages. So he wanted to go all the way through and get a PhD and be a university professor someday, you know. And my husband and I said, great, but in 4 years, if you decide you don't want a master's and a PhD, what can you do with a linguistics degree? So I think that's what I think is the benefit of what my parents, when they said communications is not a real job, that was my parents' fear because they didn't understand it. And they wanted me to be financially secure, right? Because my father, I'm at the age now, I've already outlived my own dad by 3 years. My dad died when he was 56, and I'm 59. 59 now. Oh my God, I think we're going 59 years old, but I know where that fear came from. My oldest sister went to Penn State and got a business degree, and then she worked for a business. And my sister went to nursing school, and then she became a nurse. And so when I said I wanted to be a journalist, my dad was like, why can't you go to business school like your sister? Why can't you be a nurse like your other sister? And I was like, because I don't want to work for business and I don't like the sight of blood. So, so for me, I really didn't know what I was good at, but I knew what I liked to do. And that for me was, I loved reading the newspaper, I loved watching the news, I loved debating, I loved English class, I loved to write, I loved to read. I got one award when I graduated in 1984, and that was the award for using the Claysburg Public Library the most, but it wasn't for research papers, it was to check out all the romance novels. So, anyway, I hope in, you know, whatever you do, if I leave you with anything, direct eye contact and being able to communicate well is those are skills that will, whatever you want to do, they're going to take you a lot farther.
And that's regardless if you go to
Doesn't
college or not.
matter, doesn't matter. Street books, please, street books. Thanks, everybody.
You want those? You're gonna get it.